Welcome to the Toolkit.law Continuing Legal Education webinar. I'm the founder, Tom King of Toolkit.law, focusing on the 80 plus countries with English-based legal systems. We're joined by Abdullah Ahmad and we're joined by Gigi Khan. Abdullah, you're based in Germany, I believe,
Yes, absolutely. In Germany.
in the type of law you practice there.
I do human rights, my specialty. And yes.
And many of you know Gigi Khan as our webinars director and the co-MC, Master of Ceremonies of many of our CLE webinars. The topic today is an important topic. It's on human trafficking, and specifically, we're focusing on the help sheet that we put together on agencies and organizations when it comes to human trafficking issues. Let's talk about in general. What is, Abdullah, if you were to define it, what do you call human trafficking? I heard it as the profiting off others' sufferings.
Yes, absolutely, Tom. Human trafficking is actually a very, very interesting and at the same time very important concept itself. And I think the problem with human trafficking has been it's seen as more of a crime, and I see it as more of a systematic violation of human rights.
It's
And
it's
quite
it's pure pervasive evil. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think in the easiest words, if one was to describe what human trafficking is basically using humans for whatever ulterior motives by people throughout the world.
So, Gigi, when we show everyone this help sheet, what is the purpose of this help sheet? We have North American agencies, European agencies, we have African and Asian agencies, and Oceania agencies that some cultures call the Australia, New Zealand area. What was the purpose or the goal of this help sheet, Gigi?
So basically, the goal is that as legal professionals, we already are more focused on the legal doctrines themselves when it comes to human trafficking. So, but this help sheet only highlights the people and organizations that are doing work to counter human trafficking on the ground level, right? These are NGOs, legal clinics, trauma centers, international bodies that can be essential partners in basic legal advocacy.
And we're going to start with the green column first, and Gigi, that's you. And I didn't recognize almost any of these agencies, but so Deliver Fund in USA, founded by the CA and special ops personnel. That sounds like an interesting organization. What's their
Oh,
goal?
oh,
What's their goal there?
absolutely. So basically, I'll start with how they operate. So they use intelligence and surveillance techniques, often drawn from military or other special forces trainings, to locate traffickers. They provide actionable data directly to law enforcement and sometimes even legal professionals involved in protective orders or criminal proceedings. And they're basically based in the US, the United States.
Uh, the Freedom Network USA. What's Freedom Network USA?
So it's a national coalition of service providers and attorneys. They're especially useful for legal professionals because they offer practical and trauma-informed trainings and resources on immigration relief. Like, for example, in the US, you have the T visas and continued presence, right? So they basically facilitate attorneys or legal professionals who are helping victims of human trafficking.
Going down to the next box, the Tahira Justice Center.
The Zahira Justice Center. It I think I meant it's mentioned in the help sheet because I believe this center deserves a special mention since their work is deeply intersectional, addressing gender-based violence, so not specifically focusing on women and children, but also men who are trafficked into the U.S. or out of the U.S. Right? They also talk about forced marriages and they provide legal representation along with expert guidance on survivor-centered approaches. So a lot of people who've suffered, who are victims of human trafficking, once they're recovered, they still need to heal. They still need to go through the survivor trauma healing. So that's what they provide.
And this word, the first word, is that a word that you know from one of your five languages you speak?
No, I do not. Maybe Abdullah, you
Oh
know
for
what?
oh for five? Oh for five?
Yeah, all five, all five.
No, I meant oh for five, 0 for 5.
Yeah, 0 for 5. I'm so
Okay.
sorry, Tom.
That's okay. Covenant House is an organization I have heard of. I know that they're spread out in North America, specifically Canada and the US, and I guess some
Yeah.
in Mexico. What is Covenant House?
So basically, what they do is they operate in North America, as you mentioned, US and Canada, and focus on young people who are experiencing homelessness. Homelessness can translate pretty easily into being trafficked.
Oh,
Some of the
yeah.
people, young people who are homeless, they are victims of human trafficking. So um, they what they do is they collaborate with legal clinics to support undocumented youth who are trafficked. For example, because they're homeless, they don't necessarily have access to all the facilities that normal people might have access to.
Okay, let's cover these last three boxes, please.
Okay, so rights for girls. They focus on shifting the narrative around, again, youth survivors, especially those criminalized as juvenile offenders, right? They help lead national efforts to decriminalize survivors of trafficking. And as the name itself suggests, especially young girls and young girls of color. So we're talking about Black girls or Asian girls or girls who are coming in from Africa or South Asia, right? So they specifically help the minority as opposed to the majority.
The
Moving
last,
on,
yeah, the last two
yeah,
boxes.
Center to End All Sexual Exploitation in Canada, as you can
Jeez.
see, one of the main things that happens to people who are trafficked is they are used for sexual benefits. As Abdullah mentioned initially, ulterior motives by a group of very bad people who want to use people for sexual reasons. So this group counters that and has programs that help survivors who are trafficked for sexual exploitation. The last one we have here is the Sonar Institute. And it is more on the mental health front. It offers some of the best trauma specific therapy, particularly for survivors of complex trauma or prolonged exploitation. They also work directly with legal professionals for forensic trauma assessments in asylum or criminal cases. So sometimes a panel of doctors need to sit down, they need to make certain assessments, which may be medical or which may relate to mental assessments
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to now switch gears, Abdullah, to organizations and agencies that deal with human trafficking, primarily in the European area from which you're based. Let's go ahead and look at that column on the right. Tell us about the AIR Center.
Yes, thank you, Tom. So starting with the AIR Center, which is basically based in Europe and in UK, this is one particular organization which works in the individual rights in Europe, excuse me, provides legal support in cases involving cross-border human rights violations, including trafficking. And they advise lawyers and NGOs in using European Court of Human Rights mechanisms that would eventually protect the survivors and the challenge state failures. So it is the individuals that they look after who have been trafficked somehow, and then also they challenge the state failures to prevent trafficking, which is actually enshrined in the Palermo Convention, which it basically puts an obligation on the states to stop trafficking. Beg your pardon.
Okay,
So
working down the column, what's the next box you wish to address?
yes, anti-trafficking monitoring group. This is also led by the Anti-Slavery International, UK-based coalition monitors government's compliance with the Council of Europe's Anti-Trafficking Convention. And this group publishes shadow reports and engages in policy reform, survivor protection standards, and litigation against state neglect.
Great.
Also, looking at how states basically are working and ensuring and trying to make sure the prevention of trafficking, human trafficking.
Okay, we move more to your backyard in Germany. What's KOK?
So KOK is basically is a Berlin It's an NGO. It's basically working for against the trafficking in human beings. It's a Berlin-based organization and advocates for survivor rights through legal aid. It publishes multilingual resources trying to educate people about how, they could educate themselves regarding trafficking, making sure that they do not fall, trap of any trafficking, any sort of trafficking. It evaluates member states, whatever they've done so far, whatever their you know, whatever they've been doing, whatever steps they've been taking to ensure and to prevent trafficking. It also recommendations as well. That's part of their work. They also recommend states on how they could improve their performance and the implementation of.
There's the web address. I'd sure hate to have an email address with that domain. Oh my gosh, I'd never be able to spell it. Let's go ahead and move to. By the way, are you based in Berlin?
Me, no, 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 not really.
Oh, I love Berlin. Okay, let's go to Greta.
Greta is absolutely it's really an important organization. It's basically a group of experts, and the idea is to actually look at the implementation throughout Europe as part of the Council of Europe. The convention of the Council of Europe. So it is basically it makes sure that every state ensures compliance to the convention, and it evaluates, recommends, issues publications regarding the state performance regarding trafficking, and also um, ensures that they do better and better every day and every day. So they try to recommend new stuff. So it's a great organization that has great significance in Europe.
Help us with these last three on the bottom of the column.
Yeah, so Paoki it's based in Belgium. It's federally recognized shelters the victims of trafficking. It offers emergency accommodation, which is actually really important because the victims they have to be treated really well, and this is what Paoki does. It also allows with legal counseling and psychological care because the victims go through a lot. So the psychological care is very monumental, and this organizations help the victims with them with that, and also assists survivors during criminal trials and advocates for victim-centered reforms. And a lot of human rights, sorry, beg your pardon, the trafficking rules and regulations and processes, they're not very victim-centered. So Payoka tries to shift this particularly the and try to frame the situation, around the victim. So
Okay,
yes,
and then the bottom of the column.
yes. Solwadi is active in Germany and Austria, and it supports women, particularly who've experienced trafficking. They've experienced forced marriage or exploitation. So they provide legal advice, they provide shelter, education, and reintegration programs. And it focuses on protecting undocumented women, which is really important because generally undocumented trafficked people who've been trafficked in Europe, for instance, they're the most vulnerable people because they're afraid to go to the police, because if they doubt and they're scared to go to the police because they think if they will go to the police, they would eventually be deported, considering that they're illegal migrants, for example.
And then
So Solvori really tries to protect the undocumented women and other asylum seekers.
and then Fundación Amaranta.
Yes, it's a Spanish organization. It supports trafficked women and girls in the context of sexual exploitation and domestic servitude. It works with public defenders, migrant aid networks, and international bodies to coordinate survivor care and legal support. They try to support women and girls who are vulnerable, who have no place to go, and they sort of work with public defenders and try to ensure that their rights are looked at and protected and supported as much as possible.
So, as an attorney that deals with human rights, what's the type of work that you find yourself doing the most, Abdullah?
Well,
Abdullah.
these days, I my research has actually shifted to how I'm trying to look at the large language models and the 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 due diligence process, how we could actually help the due diligence process become better through the AI that is evolving every day. So I'm actually researching on how LLMs or AI in itself could help businesses in Europe install these large language models and AI, different models to protect human rights and due diligence.
Gigi, we're now going to go to the second side. We'll start with the right side of the column. the orange or the peach color on the right. Let's talk about Oceania, which covers obviously Australia, New Zealand, and the Polynesian Islands,
Yeah.
The Southern Pacific island countries. Let's talk
Yeah.
about what organizations are available in that part of the world.
Yeah, so generally, Oceania's response is relatively centralized and government supported, right? But the civil society itself still plays a key role, especially when it comes to trauma services and advocacy. So if we start with the Australian Red Cross, I mean, the Red Cross generally is global, but specifically the Australian Red Cross, it runs several programs, including their support for trafficked people program, which is funded by the government itself, but administered through the Red Cross, the Australian Red Cross. They help survivors with access to immigration services, temporary visas, and social support. So, like as Abdullah mentioned when he was explaining his column, is that a lot of people, when they're undocumented and they're in a country, they don't have access to a lot of services. They cannot go to law enforcement. They cannot highlight issues that they might be facing. So the Red Cross is an NGO that steps in to help these people and provide them with the social support that they require. Moving on, we see the Anti-Slavery Australia. So legal support is one main thing that's provided by this organization, which is actually based at the University of Technology in Sydney. So what they do is that they provide free legal help again to survivors, and they're also very important when it comes to legal reforms. They run national legal helplines and also advocate for visa reforms to protect survivors again, right? Moving on, we have the project Respect, which is, I think it stands out because they work directly with women who are affected by trafficking again or sexual exploitation. Um, and then what they do is they partner with attorneys or legal professionals on police interviews and criminal cases. So what happens is, let's say there's a woman and she's abducted from some part of the world. She's trafficked over to one of the Oceania countries, and there she's involved in sex trade. So what Project Respect does, it steps in and it provides a platform for women who are suffering and who are going through trauma to actually reach out and get the support that they require.
And I
Next
actually,
up,
I
yeah,
actually have a friend who was literally trafficked from South America into America and dealt with that for 5 years of her life. I mean, when you hear their stories, it's just soul killing when you hear the evil that these people have been subjected to. And as long as these are legitimate organizations, you want to tip, that's why we're showing these off. Many of these are going to be regional, but we want to make people aware of these resources in case it matches when, as part of your legal practice or as a legal professional, you spot someone, you do intake with someone, you have a witness that's been involved in this, you can take advantage of these resources. Let's go ahead and continue. Gigi, what's next?
yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, Tom. Next up, we have the Walk Free Foundation. So it's based in Perth and it produces the Global Slavery Index, one of the most comprehensive global resources when it comes to modern slavery. Their research often informs legislative debates and corporate due diligence requirements, right? So it's very, very important to talk about what these organizations and agencies do when it comes to a national level in each of their specific regions, because legislative protection is one thing that traffic victims really need and require when they're going for the social support and law enforcement support that they need to fight their cause.
Okay,
Um,
the last three boxes in the right column, please.
okay, so Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat works across the region on capacity building and legal reform, especially as small island nations grapple with labor trafficking in industries such as tourism or fisheries or hard manual labor. A lot of people are trafficked from different parts of the world in hopes of earning better, making lives easier for their families back home. So a lot of human traffic victims are often caught in the web of labor trafficking, right? And they're forced to work without their documents like their passport, their IDs, which essentially do help them get recognition or identity in a state that they're not familiar with, right? Next up, we had the ECPAT New Zealand. So this is focused on preventing the sexual exploitation and trafficking of children in New Zealand. Now, whenever we talk about human trafficking, often we forget that children are also victims of human trafficking because they're young, they're not aware of how the system works, they're not confident when it comes to talking to adults. So usually children, when they're forced through this human trafficking channel, they go silent. So what this organization does is it provides children with the support, the security, the help that they might require. And they also work on a national level to create legislative reforms that protect children who've been trafficked. The last one we have is the Human Rights Law Center. So what this is it's a legal advocacy organization that addresses abuses, including human trafficking, forced labor, etc. It engages in strategic litigation, policy advocacy, and again, legal reform, which has been, I think, one of the main things that we've discussed in this help sheet, that a lot of countries are working and these agencies and organizations are helping them to have the required statutes and laws that protect victims of human trafficking itself.
Okay. We now have about 9 minutes left as we finish with the last column. So, Abdullah, we're going to go ahead now. We're going to focus on African and Asian agencies. The blue column on the second page is all of our Toolkit.law users follow along with their PDF packet. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Tom. I'll start with African and Asian agencies. I understand we have limited time, so I'll try to be as quick as possible, making sure the important information is given. Starting with HEART Kenya, it's an awareness against human rights trafficking based in Kenya, one of the East Africa's leading anti-trafficking NGO. It works to prevent trafficking through advocacy, research, and survivor services. And it runs Kenya's only trafficking specific shelter for women and girls and engages in regional litigation and policy development. And we see how most of the NGOs throughout the world focus on women and children because they are the vulnerable group and mostly the the victim of trafficking. And then we move to India real quick. Shakti is a legal advocacy organization in India engaged in anti-trafficking rescue operations, strategic litigation, and border monitoring. It works closely with police and judicial authorities to combat interstate and cross-border trafficking between India, Nepal, and Bangladesh, which are the red zones for trafficking mostly in this particular area. So the cross-border trafficking is what Shakti looks after. Then we move to Cambodia, Vietnam, and Afghanistan. This is the Hagar International. It offers trauma-informed recovery services for women and children who've experienced trafficking, forced marriage, and abuse. Forced marriage being, one typical problem in this particular area. And so people who faced such situations, including trafficking, are looked after by the Hagar International. It provides long-term shelter, very important education and legal support, and works with government bodies and survivor protection systems. And we see how.
And obviously, the web addresses for all these organizations are listed in red. I didn't mean to interrupt. Continue your thought.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. The web addresses are there, and anybody who wants to look into more, they can obviously go and explore. Then we have Insan Foundation Trust, which is a Pakistani-based NGO. It works in women's rights, gender justice, and trafficking prevention through legal awareness, policy engagement, and community empowerment. They contribute to prevention of anti-trafficking policies and offer legal clinics in Punjab's rural district. Now, what we see here in Pakistan, this is one particular sub-region organization which rather is focused in one particular area. However, it tries to work and make sure that legal, the policies somehow they try to shape the policies and offer legal clinics as well. Then we move to Blue Dragons Children Foundation, which is in Vietnam. They sort of help rescue children and women from forced labor and sex trafficking across China and Southeast Asia. The Blue Dragon legal team supports cross-border repatriation, child protection, litigation, and criminal prosecution of traffickers, which is really important. I mean, we're trying to look at how we save the victims, but prosecution of the traffickers is absolutely monumental and equally important as the protection of the victims. And then we move on to end child prosecution in Asia tourism. ECPAT Sri Lanka. This is an affiliate of the global ECPAT network, which works to combat children trafficking for sexual exploitation and forced labor, especially in tourism-heavy regions. Especially, I mean, we see Asian region has, it's a hot spot for tourism. Over the couple of years, we've seen it, and which is why it's also a hot spot for trafficking. So, end child prostitution, beg your pardon, in Asian tourism looks to identify cases and protects vulnerable youth and makes sure they're protected and they are sort of rehabilitated if need be.
Okay.
And then the last organization we have is from Cambodia, Chabdai Coalition, faith-based network, over 50 NGOs working to end trafficking in Cambodia and Southeast Asia. Now, it offers shared legal services, it offers case referrals, trauma recovery, and training for law enforcement and lawyers, also leads regional research and ethical storytelling initiatives. And lastly, it's also important that we also understand that these areas have less finances, which is why their problems persist.
Right. So obviously, again, this is the help sheet. The help sheet is human trafficking agencies and organizations. And when I sit here listening to the two of you, previously, because of my work in family law, I learned to be sensitive to whether or not someone might be a victim of family violence, right? What this makes me think of is that a legal professional, I don't have on my radar screen, that means in our American English, I'm not I'm not looking out for indicators of human trafficking, right? As a family law attorney, Gigi, we're trained, like, because you practice family law as well in Pakistan, be sensitive and listen for the telltale signs if someone is a victim of some type of abuse, right? But
Absolutely.
I don't think that way until today, maybe, that I'm also looking if someone was human trafficked.
Oh, I think it's very essential. It is absolutely essential in the world that we live in to look out for, as you mentioned, indicators of somebody who's a human trafficking victim. So I think just a little overlap would be just making sure that they carry their IDs with them and not the person who is the direct line of control, the person who controls potential victim or somebody who is a victim of human trafficking.
Okay, so we've been joined by Abdullah Ahmad in Germany. We've been joined by Gigi Khan in Pakistan. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for this presentation on human trafficking agencies and organizations.